And we're back with a sudden wardrobe change. Well, sudden for you, not for us. Hi, I'm Steve. I design most of the characters in the setting for the Downbelow narrative cyberpunk RPG.
And I'm Ian. I do setting and numbers and also business numbers. But that's not the subject of these videos. You may notice that the wardrobes and sometimes backgrounds change about every 7 episodes because that's about the chunks that we're recording these in.
This means that if you have questions that you bring up, please, you've got a week before the next episode. Well, okay, less than a week sometimes. But get them into us. We will answer them.
Yep.
Speaking of questions...
So, Steve, one of the important things about the setting is innovating and why this setting. So, what does Downbelow do to innovate on cyberpunk and sci-fi, and why did you want to create this setting, and thus what made it different in your mind from all the other cyberpunk sci-fi settings out there?
In a lot of ways, I didn't actually want to so much innovate as return to the roots. This is it's very weird, but if you look at the roots of cyberpunk, especially if you look at the roots of Gibson and Walter John Williams, there is precious little breath spent on the corporations and the political situation, and everything is about the characters and the world in which they find themselves. But as the clock rolls on, getting closer and closer to the modern day, you see fewer and fewer instances of visionaries like Charles Stross and the original Matrix movie, and you see more and more of the second and third Matrix movie. You see more and more people who are taking Blade Runner and not looking at the character of Deckard, but actually looking more at the Tyrell Corporation. And you look at cyberpunk RPGs, and the original Cyberpunk 2012 when it came out, was entirely about the characters, and then by the time you get to 2020, suddenly it's about the corporate wars, and it's about the icons, and it's about the world. Even my beloved Shadowrun talks less and less about the individual characters, and more about the power players behind the scenes. I wanted to bring it back to the roots, and that means making it about the people.
So it's less that you wanted to remake Neuromancer or the like, but that you wanted to make it about the same kind of characters, so you wanted to make a new look at the small guy in a cyberpunk setting.
Very much so. I've actually been asked before about the same thing, why I chose this particular style of setting, and my answer there was to a film buff. I explained that this was my Casablanca. Casablanca comes out of an era that the action movie was just beginning, the war movie was just beginning to hit its stride, and even the film noir movies were a big thing. But what we get out of Casablanca is a movie that is two of these things. It's a wartime movie, and it is a film noir, but it's about neither of these things. It uses the tools of both and tells a story that is neither. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to use the tools that modern cyberpunk has, the tools that technology and culture marching on have given us, and tell a story that was about the roots of cyberpunk. That wasn't about the numbers, that wasn't about the cool toys, that wasn't about the impact that cyberware has on our nervous system and the ways to make yourself a superhuman killing machine at the cost of your soul, and the ways that corporations are sucking the life out of everything. People comment enough about that in real life. I wanted to tell a story about the people that are caught in the machine. And while doing that necessitates describing the machine to some extent, it's not about the machine, it's about the people.
So you're not going to avoid including tropes like cyberware, which might make you less human by replacing so much of your body with a machine. You're not necessarily going to avoid tropes like large corporations, which are actually the power players in the world.
Not at all.
But you want to use those tropes without focusing on them.
Again, going back to the early magical days, the earliest instances of cyberpunk read very well, aside from a very few jarring mentions. If you read Neuromancer today, most of it's going to flow. Most of it's not going to jar you out of it.
You just have to ignore the kilobytes.
Well, I was about to get there. Certain Gibson novels later on would, and a lot of other early sci-fi and early cyberpunk novels will directly jar you out using old boxy cell phones in the far future, for instance. Even Star Trek The Next Generation, which talks about the Enterprise D at one point having over a terabyte of storage space. which I have 3 of in my desktop at home for cheap. Thank you, fries. It's been outpaced. What Gibson did in the magical early days was, for the most part, ignore numbers, ignore how things should work, and focus on how things feel. Occasionally he'll drop something like, this was a kilobyte of RAM and so worth millions to the right person, but other than that, he doesn't focus on the speed of the computer. He just focuses on the fact that you plug in and you are in the computer. He doesn't focus on the units of metric killingness of the gun. He just talks about how it's a particularly nasty gun. That's inspiration for what I want to do as well. Let's go back to the magical early days where the numbers matter a lot less than you might think.
Although to us, the numbers of minutes in the videos matter, so we're going to call it for now on that question and come back to you tomorrow with another question, switching off as we usually do.
Yep.
So thanks for falling through the cracks with us, and we hope you've enjoyed your time down below.